The message traveled across 10,000 light-years in the span of a heartbeat. It passed through relay stations older than human civilization, bounced off satellites that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and finally arrived at its destination, a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The Vectari Dominion had spoken. The galaxy listened. Supreme Commander Vorath Keln stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched the holographic display with satisfaction. His declaration of war had been broadcast to every corner of known space. 217 species had received his message. 217 species now knew that humanity would soon cease to exist as an independent civilization. The transmission is complete. Supreme Commander, his communications officer reported. All major powers have acknowledged receipt. Vorath allowed himself a thin smile. His gray skin stretched tight over sharp features, and his four eyes gleamed with anticipation. The Vectari were conquerors. It was their purpose, their identity, their reason for existence. For 3,000 years, they had expanded across the galaxy, absorbing weaker species into their dominion or destroying those foolish enough to resist. Humanity would be no different. "Show me Earth again," Vorath commanded. The holographic display shifted, revealing a rotating image of the human homeworld. It was a beautiful planet, Vorath had to admit. Blue oceans, green land masses, white clouds swirling across its surface. A world rich in resources and potential. A world that would soon belong to the Dominion. "Our intelligence reports indicate minimal military capability," his tactical officer said. "The humans have achieved basic interstellar travel, but their fleet consists of fewer than 200 warships. Their weapons technology is at least a century behind ours." "As expected," Vorath replied. "A young species, barely out of their cradle. They will learn the price of existing in a galaxy ruled by strength." The Dominion operated on a simple philosophy. The strong ruled, the weak served or died. It was the natural order of things, written into the very fabric of existence. The Vectari had proven their strength countless times. They had crushed rebellions, annihilated resistance movements, and built an empire spanning over 200 star systems. Humanity was simply the next chapter in their glorious history. What Vorath did not know, what he could not have known, was that his declaration had also been received by the Galactic Council. In a massive space station orbiting a neutral world, representatives of the galaxy's elder races had gathered to discuss the news. Ambassador Thesson of the Andrathi Collective sat in his assigned seat and watched the reactions of his colleagues. Some showed fear, others showed anger, a few showed resignation, but Thesson felt something entirely different. He felt pity, not for humanity, for the Vectari. "This is outrageous," the Corvan delegate declared, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "The humans are a recognized member of the galactic community. This declaration violates 17 different treaties." "Treaties mean nothing to the Dominion," the Selvari representative replied, her crystalline form flickering with nervous light. "They never have. We all know this." "Then we must respond," the Corvan insisted. "We must form a coalition, defend the humans, show the Dominion that such aggression will not be tolerated." The San remained silent, watching the debate unfold. The Andrathi were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, with records stretching back over 50,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched countless species reach for the stars, only to be consumed by the darkness between them. And they had watched humanity very, very carefully. "Ambassador Thesson," the council moderator said, "the Andrathi have been notably quiet on this matter. Does your collective have a position?" Thesson rose slowly, his ancient joints protesting the movement. His silver robes rustled as he faced his colleagues, and his deep purple eyes held a weight of knowledge that few could comprehend. "We will pray for the Vectari," he said simply. The chamber fell silent. The other delegates exchanged confused glances. "Pray for the Vectari?" the Corvan repeated. "Ambassador, surely you mean pray for humanity? They are the ones facing annihilation." Thesson shook his head slowly. "I said what I meant. We will pray for the Vectari. They will need it far more than the humans." Before anyone could question him further, Thesson sat down and closed his eyes. The other delegates stared at him, bewildered by his words. But Hassan offered no explanation. Some lessons he knew had to be learned through experience. The Vectari would learn soon enough. On Earth, the declaration of war arrived at precisely 3:47 a.m. Geneva time. It was received by the United Nations Space Command, processed through standard diplomatic protocols, and flagged for immediate attention. Admiral Chen Wei-lin was awakened by her aide's urgent knock. She had been expecting this moment for 15 years. In some ways, she had been preparing for it her entire life. She dressed quickly and made her way to the command center. Her staff was already assembled, their faces tight with tension. The holographic display showed the Vectari message, complete with its flowery language and thinly veiled threats. "They have given us 30 standard days to surrender," her chief of staff reported. "After that, they claim they will reduce Earth to ash." Chen studied the message carefully. The Vectari Supreme Commander had been thorough in his contempt. He had listed humanity's supposed weaknesses, mocked their primitive technology, and promised a swift and merciful conquest for those who submitted. She almost smiled. "What is the status of our fleet?" she asked. "All vessels are standing by, Admiral. We can have defensive formations in place within 6 hours." Chen shook her head. "No. Keep the fleet in their current positions. Maintain standard patrol patterns. Do nothing that suggests preparation for war." Her staff exchanged uncertain looks. "Admiral, with respect, the Vectari fleet is estimated at 3,000 warships. If we do not prepare—" "We are prepared," Chen interrupted. "We have been prepared for 20 years. The question is not whether we can defend ourselves. The question is how we want to fight this war." She walked to the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the holographic image of the Vectari commander, Vorath Kelm. She had studied him extensively. He was brilliant in his own way, a master of overwhelming force and psychological intimidation. He had never lost a campaign. That record was about to change. "Send our standard response," she ordered. Her communications officer hesitated. "The standard response, Admiral? Are you certain?" "I am certain. Send it now." The message was composed and transmitted within minutes. It traveled back along the same path that had brought the Vectari Declaration, crossing the vast emptiness of space until it reached the eternal conquest. Vorath received it with amusement. He had expected pleas for mercy, desperate attempts at negotiation, perhaps even pathetic threats. Instead, he received a single sentence: "We accept. May whatever gods you worship have mercy on you, because we will not." For a long moment, Vorath stared at the message. Then he laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the bridge of his flagship. "They have spirit," he admitted. "I will give them that. It will make their conquest all the more satisfying." He ordered the message to be archived and began planning the invasion. The Vectari fleet would depart within the week. In 30 days, humanity would learn the true meaning of fear. But as Vorath made his preparations, something strange was happening across the galaxy. Word of humanity's response spread quickly. Species that had cowered before the Dominion for centuries began to whisper among themselves. The humans had not begged. They had not surrendered. They had accepted the challenge and promised no mercy. On the Androthi homeworld, Ambassador Thesson received reports of the exchange. He read humanity's response and nodded slowly. "It begins," he murmured. His aide, a young Androthi still learning the ways of galactic politics, looked at him with confusion. "Ambassador, do you truly believe the humans can survive this? The Dominion has never been defeated." Thesson turned to face the younger being. In his eyes was a mixture of knowledge and something that might have been fear. "Let me tell you something about humans," he said. "Something that our records have shown us over the years. We have observed them. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest or the most intelligent. Their technology is adequate but unremarkable. On paper, they should be easy prey for any serious military power. Then why pray for the Vectari?" Thesson was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because humans do not fight like anyone else. They do not surrender when they should. They do not die when they are supposed to. They smile in the face of certain death and find ways to survive that no rational being would ever consider. They are, quite simply, the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever produced." He turned back to the window, gazing out at the stars. The Vecthari have conquered 200 worlds because no one has ever truly challenged them. They have never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. They have never fought a species that evolved on a death world, that survived ice ages and mass extinctions, and 100,000 years of warfare against itself. His aide swallowed nervously. What will happen? Tessin closed his eyes. The Vecthari have declared war on humanity. They believe they are the predators, and the humans are the prey. They are about to discover how terribly wrong they are. In Geneva, Admiral Chen stood before her command staff and began outlining their strategy. There were no speeches about glory or honor, no dramatic declarations of defiance, just calm, methodical planning. We will let them come, she said. We will let them believe they are winning. And when they are deep in our territory, committed and overconfident, we will show them what humanity is truly capable of. She paused, looking at each of her officers in turn. The galaxy thinks we are weak. We have allowed them to think this. For 20 years, we have hidden our true strength, built our defenses in secret, and waited for this moment. Now it has arrived. Her voice hardened. The Vecthari won a war. We will give them one they will never forget. Outside the command center, the sun rose over Geneva. A new day was beginning. In 30 days, the Vecthari fleet would arrive. In 30 days, the galaxy would witness something that had not happened in 3,000 years. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The Vecthari fleet entered the Sol system like a swarm of locusts descending upon a field of grain. 3,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons capable of reducing cities to rubble. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their arrival heralded by bursts of exotic radiation that lit up sensors across the system. Supreme Commander Vorath stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest and surveyed his domain. This was the moment he lived for. The moment before conquest, when the enemy realized the full extent of their doom and despair began to take hold. But something was wrong. Report, he commanded. His sensor officer studied his displays with growing confusion. Supreme Commander, I am detecting no defensive formations, no fleet movements. The human vessels appear to be maintaining standard patrol patterns. Show me. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the positions of every known human vessel in the system. They were scattered across various points, going about their business as if nothing unusual was happening. Cargo ships continued their routes. Patrol vessels maintained their assigned sectors. There was no sign of the desperate mobilization that should have accompanied an invasion fleet of this magnitude. Perhaps they have surrendered, Vorath's second-in-command suggested. They may have realized the futility of resistance. Vorath considered this possibility. It would not be the first time a species had chosen submission over annihilation. But something about the situation bothered him. The humans had sent that defiant message. They had promised no mercy. Such words did not come from beings prepared to surrender. Continue the advance, he ordered. All ships maintain formation. Sensor teams, full active scans. I want to know if they are hiding anything. The fleet moved deeper into the system. Hours passed. The Vecthari armada crossed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus, then Saturn. With each passing moment, Vorath's unease grew. Where were the defenders? Where were the desperate last stands that marked every other conquest? Supreme Commander, his communications officer reported, we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it through. A human female appeared on the display. She wore a simple military uniform, her gray hair pulled back severely from a weathered face. Her eyes were calm, almost peaceful. This is Admiral Chen Wei-Lin of the United Nations Space Command, she said. Welcome to our solar system. We have been expecting you. Vorath leaned forward. You are the commander of Earth's defenses? I am. Then you know why we are here. Surrender now, and we will be merciful. Your people will be allowed to live as subjects of the Dominion. Resist, and we will destroy everything you have built. Admiral Chen smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it sent an unexpected chill down Vorath's spine. Thank you for the offer, she said. We decline, but I wanted to give you one final chance to withdraw. Leave our system now, and we will not pursue. Stay, and you will die here. All of you. Vorath laughed, though it sounded forced even to his own ears. You threaten us? With what? Your pathetic fleet of 200 ships? We have 3,000. I know, Chen replied. We counted. The transmission ended. Vorath stared at the blank display for a long moment. Then he shook himself and turned to his officers. The humans are insane, he declared. It changes nothing. Continue the advance. We will reach Earth within 12 hours. The fleet continued forward. They passed the asteroid belt without incident. Mars loomed ahead, its rusty surface empty and lifeless. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Then the first ship disappeared. It was a patrol vessel on the outer edge of the formation. One moment it was there, transmitting normal status reports. The next moment, it was simply gone. No explosion, no distress call, just a sudden absence where a ship had been. What happened? Vorath demanded. Unknown, Supreme Commander. We are attempting to investigate. Before the investigation could begin, 2 more ships vanished. Then 5, then 12. They disappeared in complete silence. Swallowed by the void without a trace. Panic began to spread through the fleet. Captains demanded answers. Crews whispered about ghosts and demons. The Vecthari had conquered countless worlds, but they had never experienced anything like this. Vorath ordered scout ships to investigate the areas where vessels had disappeared. They found wreckage eventually. Torn metal and frozen debris floating in the darkness. But the damage patterns made no sense. The cuts were impossibly precise, as if made by weapons far beyond anything in the Vecthari arsenal. How is this possible? His tactical officer whispered. Their technology is supposed to be inferior to ours. Vorath had no answer. He ordered the fleet to tighten formation, to concentrate their sensors on the space around them. But ships continued to disappear. 50, 100, 200. Each loss chipped away at the Vecthari confidence that had seemed unshakable just hours before. What they did not know, what they could not detect, was the network of weapons platforms hidden throughout the system. Humanity had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. They had built defenses disguised as asteroids, weapons hidden in the debris of ancient comets, sensor systems so subtle that even Vecthari technology could not detect them. And then there were the sleepers. Captain Sarah Mitchell had been born for this war. Not literally, of course, but from the moment she had enlisted in the UNSC at 18 years old, she had been trained for a single purpose: to fight the enemy that everyone knew would eventually come. Her team had been in position for 3 weeks, drifting in a specially designed stealth pod that was invisible to every known sensor technology. They had watched the Vecthari fleet arrive. They had waited as it advanced, and when the order came, they had gone to work. Target acquired, her second-in-command reported. Vecthari destroyer, range 4,000 kilometers. Sarah studied the vessel through her tactical display. It was 3 times the size of their assault craft, bristling with weapons that could reduce them to atoms in an instant. By any reasonable measure, attacking it was suicide. Sarah smiled. Humans had never been particularly reasonable. All teams execute, she ordered. The assault was over in 90 seconds. Sarah's team breached the destroyer's hull at 7 points simultaneously, using cutting tools that sliced through Vecthari armor like paper. They moved through the ship with terrifying efficiency, neutralizing crew members before they could sound alarms. By the time the captain realized his ship was under attack, Sarah was already on the bridge. "Hello," she said pleasantly. "My name is Captain Mitchell. We are going to ask you some questions now." The Vecthari captain stared at her in disbelief. How did you get aboard your ship?" "We walked." She glanced at her team. "Secure the prisoners. Prepare for extraction." Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Human special operations teams struck at random, capturing some ships and destroying others. They moved like ghosts, appearing from nowhere and vanishing just as quickly. The Vecthari, for all their military might, had no experience fighting an enemy they could not see. On Earth, Admiral Chen monitored the operation from her command center. Reports flowed in constantly, updating the status of the invisible war being waged in the darkness between planets. "Total Vecthari losses now exceed 400 vessels," her aide reported. "We have suffered 3 casualties. None confirmed dead." Chen nodded. The numbers were good, but she felt no satisfaction. This was not about killing Vecthari. This was about sending a message. "How are the prisoners being treated?" she asked. "According to protocol, Admiral. Medical care for the wounded. Standard rations and quarters for all." "Good. Make sure it stays that way." The aide hesitated. "Admiral, some of our people are questioning that policy. The Vekthari have conquered dozens of species. They have committed atrocities that—" "I know what they have done," Chen interrupted, "and I know what we are capable of doing. We are not fighting this war to become like them. We are fighting to show them a better way. That starts with how we treat our prisoners." She turned back to the main display, watching the scattered wreckage of Vekthari ships drift through the void. "They expected us to fight like everyone else they have conquered. Head-on battles, heroic last stands, desperate resistance followed by inevitable defeat. Instead, we are showing them something they have never experienced." "What is that, Admiral?" Chen's eyes were cold. "Fear." On the Eternal Conquest, Vorath was beginning to understand that fear. 400 ships gone, and they had not even reached Mars. His crew was terrified. His captains were demanding answers he could not provide. And somewhere in the darkness, an enemy he could not see was picking his fleet apart, piece by piece. "We should withdraw," his second-in-command urged. "Regroup, analyze this new threat, return with better preparations." "Withdrawal is not an option," Vorath snapped. "Dominion law is clear. Retreat means execution." "Then we are trapped between death and death." Vorath slammed his fist against the console. "We are the Vekthari. We have conquered 200 worlds. We do not flee from a species that was living in caves while our ancestors built starships." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. The humans should have been easy prey. Everything in their intelligence reports suggested a primitive, disorganized species barely capable of defending their own planet. Instead, they faced an enemy that fought like no other. A new report arrived. One of the captured Vekthari officers had been released by the humans. His ship had been destroyed, but he had been given a small transport and allowed to return to the fleet with a message. When the officer arrived on the Eternal Conquest, Vorath demanded to know what had happened. The officer was shaking. His eyes held a haunted quality that Vorath had never seen in a Vekthari warrior. They treated us well," the officer said. "They gave us food, medical care. They answered our questions honestly. When I asked why they were not torturing us for information, the human officer just looked confused." "Confused?" "She said—" The officer swallowed hard. "She said, 'You are not a threat anymore. Why would we hurt you?'" And then she smiled. "Supreme Commander." She smiled like she genuinely did not understand why anyone would harm a helpless prisoner. Vorath felt cold. "What message did they send?" The officer handed over a small data chip. Vorath inserted it into the display, and Admiral Chen's face appeared once more. "By now you have lost approximately 400 ships," she said. "We have lost none. This is not because we are lucky. This is not because your fleet is weak. This is because you have made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into the camera. "You think you are predators. You think we are prey. But you evolved on a world of plenty where food was abundant and competition was minimal. We evolved on a death world. We survived ice ages, volcanic winters, mass extinctions. We fought for every day of our existence against a planet that seemed determined to kill us." Her voice hardened. "We are not prey, Supreme Commander. We are the most efficient predators this galaxy has ever produced. We do not fight like you because we do not need to. We do not meet enemies in honorable battle because honor does not win wars. Survival does." The recording ended. Vorath stood in silence, processing what he had seen and heard. Around him, his officers waited for orders, their faces pale with uncertainty. Finally, Vorath spoke. "Continue the advance." His second-in-command stared at him. "Supreme Commander?" "I said continue the advance. We will reach Earth. We will find their hidden weapons and destroy them. We will show these humans that no amount of trickery can defeat the Dominion." It was a brave declaration. But as the fleet moved forward, losing more ships with every passing hour, even Vorath began to wonder if bravery would be enough. In the darkness between worlds, Captain Sarah Mitchell finished her latest mission and prepared for the next. Her team had captured another vessel, gathered more intelligence, and disappeared before the Vecthari could respond. "How many does that make?" her second-in-command asked. 23 ships captured, 41 destroyed, and the main event hasn't even started yet." She looked out at the distant stars where the Earth hung like a blue jewel against the void. "They think they are hunting us," she said quietly. "They have no idea that they have been the prey all along." The fleet continued its doomed advance, and somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, humanity waited, patient, silent, deadly. The real war was about to begin. Sub-Commander Traxus had served the Dominion for 40 years. He had fought in 17 campaigns, conquered 8 worlds, and earned every honor the Vecthari military could bestow. He was a warrior born and bred, hardened by decades of combat into something cold and efficient. Now he sat in a human medical facility, watching a young human nurse change the bandages on his wounds. And he was more frightened than he had ever been in his life. The fear did not come from the wounds themselves. They were serious but not life-threatening. A piece of shrapnel from his ship's destruction had torn through his side, and another had broken 2 of his arms. Painful, certainly, but nothing that would not heal. No, the fear came from the humans themselves. They were kind. Traxus had expected torture. Every species the Dominion had conquered used torture to extract information from prisoners. It was standard practice, universal throughout the galaxy. Pain was the fastest way to break resistance, to learn what enemies knew, to establish dominance over the defeated. But the humans did not torture. They healed. The nurse finished her work and smiled at him. "The doctor says you are recovering well. You should be able to walk again in a few days." Traxus stared at her. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you are hurt. But I am your enemy. My fleet came here to conquer your world, to enslave your people." The nurse's smile did not waver. "You came here because your commanders ordered you to come. That does not make you evil. It makes you a soldier following orders." She gathered her supplies. "Besides, you are not a threat anymore. What would be the point of hurting you?" She left before Traxus could respond. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, trying to understand these strange beings who treated their enemies with compassion instead of cruelty. In the cell next to his, a younger Vecthari officer named Korath was having a similar experience. He had been captured during one of the human raids, dragged from his bridge by soldiers who moved with terrifying precision. He had been certain that death awaited him. Instead, he had been given a warm meal, a comfortable bed, and access to reading materials about human history and culture. No one had asked him a single question about Dominion military tactics. No one had threatened him or his family. No one had done anything except treat him like a guest rather than a prisoner. It was the most disturbing experience of his life. A human soldier entered his cell, not one of the terrifying special operations warriors who had captured him, but a regular guard with a friendly face and an easy manner. "Lunchtime," the guard said, placing a tray on the small table. "Today we have something called pasta. It is pretty good if you ask me." Korath looked at the food suspiciously. "Is it poisoned?" The guard laughed. "Why would we poison you? We went through a lot of trouble to capture you alive." He sat down across from Korath, uninvited but not unwelcome. "You know, I was wondering something. Why did your people attack us?" Korath considered not answering, but something about the guard's open curiosity made him want to explain. "It is the way of the Dominion," he said. "The strong conquer the weak. It has always been so." "But why?" Because that is the natural order. The strong survive. The weak perish. It is how the universe works." The guard nodded thoughtfully. "We used to think like that too, you know. For most of our history, we fought each other constantly. Wars over land, resources, religion, ideology. We killed millions of our own kind for reasons that seem stupid now. What changed? We almost destroyed ourselves. Several times, actually. But we survived. And eventually, we learned that cooperation was more powerful than competition. That building things was better than destroying them." The guard shrugged. "It took us a long time to figure that out. Maybe your people just need more time." Korath did not know how to respond. The idea that strength could come from cooperation rather than domination was so foreign to Vecthari, thinking that he could barely comprehend it. Meanwhile, on the Eternal Conquest, Supreme Commander Vorath was receiving reports that only deepened his growing despair. The fleet had lost 600 ships now, 600 vessels, crewed by the finest warriors in the Dominion, destroyed or captured by an enemy they could not see and could not fight. Morale was collapsing. Crews whispered about demons and curses. Some captains had begun ignoring orders, their fear of the invisible enemy greater than their fear of Dominion punishment. "We need to understand how they fight," Vorath said during an emergency meeting of his senior officers. "Nothing in our experience prepares us for this kind of warfare." His intelligence chief stepped forward. "We have analyzed all available data, Supreme Commander. The humans employ a strategy that has no equivalent in galactic warfare. They call it persistence hunting." "Explain." "According to our research, humans evolved on a world where they were not the strongest or fastest predators. Their ancestors survived by hunting prey through exhaustion. They would track an animal for hours or even days, never letting it rest, never letting it escape, until finally it collapsed from exhaustion and they could kill it easily." Vorath felt a chill run down his spine. "They hunt by wearing their prey down." "Exactly. They do not need to win individual engagements. They simply need to keep applying pressure until we cannot continue. Every ship we lose weakens us. Every hour we spend searching for an invisible enemy drains our resources and our morale. They are not trying to defeat us in battle. They are trying to exhaust us into submission." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Vectari were accustomed to enemies who stood and fought. They knew how to defeat fleets and conquer planets. But how did you fight an enemy who refused to engage on your terms? How did you defeat a predator whose greatest weapon was patience? "There is more," the intelligence chief continued. "The humans have a saying, 'The tiger does not need to roar.' They believe that true strength does not need to be displayed. They deliberately concealed their capabilities for decades, allowing the galaxy to believe they were weak. Why would they do that? Because it makes their enemies underestimate them, because it lulls potential threats into complacency, and because—" the chief hesitated, "because they knew that one day someone would attack them, and they wanted that attacker to be completely unprepared for what they would face." Vorath slammed his fist against the table. "They planned for this. They wanted us to attack." "It appears so, Supreme Commander. Our invasion did not catch them off guard. They were waiting for us." The meeting dissolved into arguments and recriminations. Some officers demanded immediate withdrawal, regardless of Dominion law. Others insisted on pressing forward, convinced that the humans would eventually run out of tricks. A few simply sat in stunned silence, their worldview shattered by the realization that they had walked into a trap 20 years in the making. In the midst of the chaos, a new message arrived from Earth. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the display, calm and collected as always. "I wanted to share something with you," she said, "a piece of human history that might help you understand what you are facing." The display shifted to show images of ancient humans. They were primitive creatures, lacking the technology and power that defined modern humanity. They carried simple weapons, spears and stones, and they lived in a world filled with predators far more dangerous than themselves. "Our ancestors were not the apex predators of their world," Chen narrated. "They were prey for countless species. Saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, giant bears. By any rational measure, they should have gone extinct millions of years ago." The images changed, showing humans hunting in coordinated groups. They tracked a massive mammoth across endless plains, following it day after day, until the great beast finally collapsed. "But we survived because we learned to hunt in ways that no other predator could match. We did not need to be the strongest, we just needed to be the most patient. We would chase prey for days, tracking it relentlessly, never letting it escape. And eventually, no matter how powerful the prey, it would fall." Chen's face returned to the display. "You have entered our territory. You have threatened our home. And now you are learning what our ancestors' prey learned millions of years ago." Her voice hardened. "You cannot escape us. You cannot outlast us. You cannot hide from us. We will follow you wherever you go, and we will never, ever stop." The transmission ended. Vorath stood motionless, processing what he had seen. Around him, his officers were pale with fear. The bravado that had marked the invasion's beginning was gone, replaced by a growing understanding of just how badly they had miscalculated. "We cannot win this war," his second-in-command said quietly. "Not like this." Vorath wanted to argue. He wanted to proclaim that the Dominion was invincible, that no primitive species could stand against their might, but the words would not come. 600 ships lost, countless warriors dead or captured, and they had not even reached Earth yet. "Continue the advance," he said finally. "We will reach Earth. We will force them to fight us directly, and we will see if their tricks work when they must defend their homeworld." It was not a plan born of strategy. It was desperation. But it was all Vorath had left. Back in the human medical facility, Sub-Commander Traxxas had recovered enough to walk. He moved through the corridors slowly, observing the humans who passed by. They nodded at him politely. Some even offered friendly greetings. No one treated him like a prisoner, though he was surely that. He found a window overlooking the grounds outside. A garden stretched below, filled with plants from a dozen different worlds. Human children played among the flowers, their laughter carrying up through the glass. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside him. Traxxas turned to find an elderly human standing nearby. The human's uniform identified him as a military officer, though he walked with the careful steps of someone whose fighting days were long behind him. "I am General Marcus Webb," the human said. "Retired now, but they keep me around for moments like this." "Moments like what?" "Moments when an enemy needs to understand something important." Webb gestured at the garden below. "Do you know why we fight, Sub-Commander?" Traxxas considered the question. "To conquer. To prove your strength." "No." Webb shook his head. "We fight to protect. That garden down there, those children playing in it, they are why we fight. Not for glory or power or conquest. We fight because there are things in this universe worth protecting, and we will do whatever it takes to keep them safe." Traxxas looked down at the garden. The concept was strange to him. In the Dominion, war was an end in itself, a means of proving superiority and expanding influence. The idea of fighting purely to protect, with no thought of conquest or gain, was almost incomprehensible. "Your fleet will not win this war," Webb continued, "not because we are stronger or smarter, but because you are fighting for the wrong reasons. You fight because your laws demand it. We fight because we choose to. That choice makes all the difference." He turned to leave, then paused. "When this war is over, Sub-Commander, I hope you will remember this conversation. Not all strength comes from conquest. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to stop fighting." Webb walked away, leaving Traxxas alone with his thoughts. Outside the facility, the sun was setting. The sky blazed with colors that Traxxas had never seen on his homeworld. And somewhere in the darkness beyond that sky, the Vecthari fleet continued its doomed advance toward Earth. Traxxas wondered how many of his comrades would survive to see another sunset. He suspected the answer was far fewer than anyone expected. The Vecthari fleet had been reduced to 800 ships, 2,200 vessels lost in the journey from the edge of the solar system to the orbit of Mars. They had not destroyed a single human warship. They had not captured a single human position. They had simply bled, slowly and constantly, while an invisible enemy picked them apart with surgical precision. Supreme Commander Vorath stood on his bridge and watched Mars grow larger in the view screen. The red planet hung before them like a promise of relief. Once they passed it, Earth would be within striking distance. Once they reached Earth, the humans would have no choice but to fight directly. And in a direct battle, surely the Dominion's superior numbers and firepower would prevail. Surely. "Supreme Commander," his sensor officer reported, "we are detecting unusual activity around Earth." "Show me." The view screen shifted, revealing the distant blue world that had been their target from the beginning. But something had changed. Around Earth, hundreds of new signatures were appearing. Ships emerging from orbital facilities, from hidden bases on the moon, from positions throughout the inner system. The human fleet was finally revealing itself. Vorath leaned forward, studying the display. "How many ships?" "Approximately 1,500 vessels, Supreme Commander." "Still increasing." 1,500. The Dominion's intelligence had claimed humanity possessed fewer than 200 warships. Yet here they were, fielding a fleet nearly twice the size of what remained of the Vecthari armada. They lied about their strength, Vorath breathed. Everything they showed us was a deception. It appears so, Supreme Commander. For a moment, Vorath felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, an enemy he could see. Finally, a battle he could understand. The invisible war had been a nightmare. But this was something familiar. Ships against ships, warriors against warriors, the kind of conflict the Dominion had won 1,000 times before. All vessels form attack formation, he commanded. We will engage the human fleet directly. It is time to show them what the Dominion is truly capable of. The remaining 800 Vectari ships began to move, arranging themselves into the fearsome assault pattern that had broken countless enemies. Whatever tricks the humans had used before, they would avail them nothing now. This would be decided by raw power, and in raw power, the Dominion had always triumphed. On the bridge of the UNSC flagship Resolution, Admiral Chen watched the Vectari formation take shape. Around her, officers moved with quiet efficiency, preparing for the battle that everyone had known was coming. They are committed now, her tactical officer reported. No possibility of retreat. Good, Chen's voice was calm. Signal all units. Execute Operation Final Dawn. The human fleet began to move. Unlike the rigid formations of the Dominion, the human ships flowed like water, each vessel operating in perfect coordination with its neighbors while maintaining the flexibility to respond to changing conditions. They had trained for this moment for 2 decades. Every captain knew their role. Every crew understood what was at stake. The two fleets closed on each other. At 200,000 kilometers, the Vectari opened fire. Massive beams of energy lanced across space, designed to shatter shields and melt armor. It was the same opening barrage that had annihilated 100 enemy fleets. The human ships scattered like a flock of birds disturbed by a predator. They dispersed in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were anything but, slipping through the gaps in the Vectari fire with millimeter precision. Before the Dominion gunners could adjust their aim, the humans were among them. What followed was not a battle, it was a lesson. Human ships darted through the Vectari formation, striking at vulnerable points with devastating accuracy. They targeted engines, weapon systems, communication arrays, everything that kept a warship fighting. They did not try to destroy their enemies outright. They crippled them, rendered them helpless, and moved on to the next target. Vorath watched in horror as his fleet fell apart around him. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not form lines or trade volleys or try to overwhelm through sheer firepower. They moved like wolves among sheep, coordinating attacks with inhuman precision, exploiting every weakness in the Vectari formation. How are they doing this? He demanded. How are they coordinating so effectively? His communications officer shook his head helplessly. I do not know, Supreme Commander. Their communications are completely encrypted. We cannot intercept or jam their signals. Another explosion rocked the Eternal Conquest. Alarms blared throughout the ship as damage reports flooded in. A human strike force had crippled their main weapons array in a single pass. Before they could respond, the attackers were gone, already engaging another target. Supreme Commander, we must retreat, his second-in-command shouted. The fleet is being annihilated. There is nowhere to retreat to, Vorath replied. His voice was strangely calm, the calm of a being who had accepted the inevitable. Our supply lines are cut. Our navigation data has been corrupted by human electronic warfare. Even if we could flee, we would never make it home. He looked at the display, watching the systematic destruction of everything he had built. 800 ships reduced to 600, then 500, then 400. Each loss was another nail in the Dominion's coffin, and yet through it all, the humans continued their strange mercy. Ships that surrendered were allowed to do so. Escape pods were not targeted. Crews that abandoned their vessels were rescued rather than destroyed. It was as if the humans did not want to kill. They simply wanted to win. Captain Sarah Mitchell's assault craft dove through the chaos of the battle, her team engaging one target after another. Her ship was small compared to the massive Vectari warships, but in close combat, size was often a disadvantage. She could maneuver where the enemy could not, strike where they could not respond. Target locked, her weapons officer reported. Vectari cruiser, 3,000 kilometers. Take out their engines, weapons only if necessary. The assault craft screamed forward, its advanced systems allowing it to evade the cruiser's defensive fire. A precise burst of weapons fire struck the cruiser's engine section, and the massive ship went dark, drifting helplessly through the void. "Clean kill," her second-in-command said. "They are done." Sarah nodded, already looking for the next target. But part of her mind was elsewhere, thinking about the enemy crews they were leaving alive. On any other battlefield, against any other species, those crews would be prisoners at best, corpses at worst. But the humans had made a different choice. They would win this war. That much was certain. But how they won mattered almost as much as the victory itself. The battle continued for 6 more hours. When it finally ended, the Vectari fleet had been reduced to fewer than 100 functional vessels. The rest drifted through space, crippled and helpless, their crews awaiting rescue or surrender. The Eternal Conquest still functioned, but barely. Its weapons were gone. Its engines were damaged beyond repair. Its shields had failed hours ago. Varath stood on his darkened bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of his command, and waited for the end. It came in the form of a human boarding party. They moved through the ship with the same terrifying efficiency that had marked every human operation, securing compartments and capturing crew with minimal violence. Within an hour, the entire ship was under human control. Varath did not resist when they came for him. There was no point. The war was over. Everything he had worked for, everything he had believed in, lay in ruins around him. A human officer approached him. She was young, with short dark hair and eyes that held a surprising lack of hostility. "Supreme Commander Vorath," she said, "you are now a prisoner of the United Nations Space Command. You will be treated according to the conventions governing prisoners of war." Vorath laughed bitterly. "Conventions. Mercy. You speak of such things while standing in the wreckage of my fleet." "Your fleet attacked us," the officer replied simply. "We defended ourselves. Now that the fighting is over, there is no reason for further violence. The Dominion does not show mercy to defeated enemies. Then perhaps the Dominion has something to learn." Vorath was escorted off his bridge, through corridors filled with captured Vectari and watchful human guards. As he walked, he noticed something that struck him deeply. The humans were already providing medical care to wounded Vectari. They were distributing food and water to prisoners. They were treating their defeated enemies with a kindness that he had never shown to anyone in his entire career. He wanted to hate them for it. He wanted to see their mercy as weakness, as proof that they lacked the strength to do what needed to be done. But he could not. Not after watching them dismantle his fleet with such devastating efficiency. These were not weak beings playing at kindness. These were predators who had chosen to show restraint, and that somehow was more terrifying than any cruelty could have been. As he was led aboard a human transport, Vorath caught one last glimpse of Earth through a viewport. The blue planet hung in the void, beautiful and serene, completely untouched by the battle that had raged to protect it. He had come to conquer that world. Instead, it had conquered him. But as the transport began its journey to Earth, Vorath realized that his personal fate was the least of his concerns. Somewhere back home, the Dominion would be waiting for news. They would learn of this defeat, the first true defeat in 3,000 years of conquest, and they would have to decide what to do next. On the Resolution, Admiral Chen received the final casualty reports. The human fleet had lost 47 ships, with 212 confirmed dead. The Vectari had lost over 2,900 vessels and an estimated 2 million personnel, though most of those had been captured rather than killed. It was an overwhelming victory, and yet Chen felt no triumph, only a heavy sense of responsibility for what came next. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the Dominion leadership has been informed of the battle's outcome. They are requesting contact." Chen nodded slowly. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The battle was won, but the war was not over. Not yet. "Tell them I will speak with them tomorrow," she said. "First, I need to have a conversation with Supreme Commander Vorath." "Yes, Admiral." Chen looked out at the stars. At the drifting wreckage of the Vectari fleet, at the wounded ships and rescue operations that filled the void around Earth. The hardest part of any war was not winning it. The hardest part was ending it in a way that prevented the next one. She hoped humanity was ready for that challenge. Vorth woke in a bed softer than anything he had ever slept on. Sunlight streamed through a window, casting warm patterns across the floor. For a moment, he did not know where he was. Then memory returned, and with it, the weight of everything that had happened. He sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings. The room was simple but comfortable, far from the prison cell he had expected. A small table held a tray of food. A screen on the wall displayed a peaceful garden scene. Through the window, he could see buildings stretching toward a horizon he had never expected to witness with his own eyes. He was on Earth. The door opened, and Admiral Chen walked in. She wore a simple uniform, and her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had not slept in days. But her eyes were sharp, clear, and surprisingly kind. "Good morning, Supreme Commander," she said. "I trust you slept well." Vorth stood, his old instincts demanding that he show no weakness before an enemy. "Why am I here? Why am I not in a cell?" "Because you are not a criminal. You are a soldier who followed orders." Chen gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Against his better judgment, Vorth sat. Chen took the chair across from him, close enough to conversation, but far enough to maintain a respectful distance. "Your fleet has been neutralized," she began. "Of the 3,000 ships you brought into our system, fewer than 100 remain functional. The rest have been destroyed or captured. Your supply lines are cut. Your communication with the Dominion is being monitored. For all practical purposes, your invasion has failed." Vorth said nothing. The facts were undeniable. "What happens now is up to you," Chen continued, "and to some extent, up to the Dominion leadership." "The Dominion does not negotiate with defeated enemies," Vorth replied. "We conquer or we die. There is no middle ground." "There is always a middle ground. The question is whether you are willing to see it." Chen stood and walked to the window. For a long moment, she stared out at the city beyond. "Let me tell you what humanity could do," she said. "We have the coordinates of your homeworld. We have ships capable of reaching it within weeks. We have weapons that could reduce your civilization to ash, just as you threatened to do to us." Vorath felt a chill run through him. He had made those exact threats. He knew what they meant. "Every military doctrine we possess would support total retaliation," Chen continued. "You attacked us without provocation. You came to enslave our people. By any standard of justice, we would be within our rights to end the Vectari Dominion forever." She turned to face him, and her eyes held something he had not expected. Sadness. "But we will not." Vorath stared at her. "Why? You have the power. You have the justification. Why would you not use it?" Chen returned to her seat. "Because we have learned something that the Dominion never has. We have learned that revenge is not justice, that destruction is not strength, that the cycle of violence once started is almost impossible to stop." She leaned forward, her voice intense. "Humanity nearly destroyed itself a dozen times over. We have had wars that killed millions. We have built weapons capable of ending all life on our planet. We have seen the darkness that lives in our own hearts, and we have faced it, and we have chosen to be better." Vorth listened, trying to understand. "You are saying that you could destroy us, but you choose not to." "Yes. Why?" "Because there is no victory in destruction. If we annihilate the Dominion, we prove that we are no different from you. We become the very thing we fought against. And more than that," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we do not want to be the reason that billions of Vectari die. We do not want your children to grow up in the shadow of what we did to their world. We want something better, for us and for you." Vorath sat in silence for a long time. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed, told him that this was weakness, that mercy was the luxury of fools and the downfall of empires. And yet here he was, a defeated commander, being offered something he had never offered anyone: a chance. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Peace," Chen replied simply. "Real peace, not the temporary cessation of hostility that comes from one side being too weak to continue fighting. We want the Dominion to understand that conquest is not the only path to greatness, that cooperation can achieve more than domination ever could. The Dominion will never accept this. Perhaps not immediately, but you could help them understand." Vorath looked at her sharply. You want me to betray my people? No, I want you to save them. Chen stood again, pacing slowly. Think about what happens if we pursue total war. The Dominion will fight to the last being, because that is what you do. Billions will die on both sides. Entire worlds will be reduced to rubble. And even if we win, even if we destroy the Dominion completely, we will have created enemies for generations. The survivors will hate us. Their children will hate us. The cycle will continue forever. She stopped, facing him directly. Or we can try something different. You return to the Dominion with a message. Not a message of surrender, but a message of possibility. You tell them that humanity offers peace, that we will not pursue vengeance, that we want to build something better than either of us has managed alone. They will think I have been corrupted, that you have broken me. Perhaps. But they will also have to face the reality of what happened here. 3,000 ships destroyed by a species they thought was weak. That will make them listen, even if they do not want to. Vorath stood and walked to the window. The city spread before him, full of life and activity. Humans walked the streets below, going about their daily business, completely unaware of the conversations being held in this room. Children played in parks. Merchants sold their goods. Life continued as it always did, despite the wars and threats and darkness that surrounded it. On my world, he said quietly, we do not have gardens like this. We do not have children playing in the streets. Everything serves the war effort. Everything exists to make us stronger, to make us better conquerors. Is that what you want for your people? Endless war? Generation after generation, knowing nothing but battle? Vorath did not answer. He did not know how to. Chen joined him at the window. We are giving you a choice, Supreme Commander. You can return to the Dominion and continue as you always have. You can tell them that humanity is weak, that we spared you out of foolishness, and that they should attack again as soon as possible. And if you do, we will be waiting. We will defeat them again and again until one side or the other is destroyed completely. She paused. Or you can tell them the truth. That humanity is strong, stronger than the Dominion ever imagined. That we have the power to destroy them, but choose not to. And that we are offering something that no enemy has ever offered the Vectari before. Friendship. Vorath turned to look at her. You truly believe this is possible? That two species who have been at war can simply stop? I believe it is worth trying, because the alternative is too terrible to accept. The room fell silent. Outside, the sun continued its arc across the sky, indifferent to the weight of the decision being made. Finally, Vorath spoke. I will take your message to the Dominion. I do not know if they will listen. I do not know if I can convince them of anything, but... He paused, searching for words. I have seen how you treat your enemies. I have seen mercy where I expected cruelty, kindness where I expected hate. Perhaps there is something here worth preserving. Chen nodded, and for the first time she smiled. That is all we can ask. 3 weeks later, Vorath stood before the High Council of the Vectari Dominion. The chamber was silent, every eye fixed on the commander who had led the greatest defeat in their history. He told them everything. The hidden defenses, the impossible tactics, the systematic destruction of the fleet. He held nothing back, even the parts that shamed him. And then he told them about the mercy. They could have destroyed us, he said. Every ship, every survivor, every prisoner. They had the power and the justification. Instead, they healed our wounded. They fed our hungry. They treated our captured warriors with dignity and respect. The council murmured among themselves. Such concepts were foreign to them. And now they offer us peace, Vorath continued. Not the peace of subjugation, but the peace of equals. They want to build something with us, not destroy us. They want to show us another way. The High Counselor leaned forward. And what do they ask in return? Nothing except that we stop conquering, that we redirect our strength toward building instead of destroying, that we give cooperation a chance. This is weakness, one counselor spat. They are afraid of us. No, Vorath's voice was firm. They are not afraid of anything. That is the point. They do not need to destroy us to prove their strength. They have already proven it. Now they are proving something else, that strength does not require cruelty, that power does not demand domination. The debate continued for hours, days, weeks. The Dominion had never faced such a choice, and many could not comprehend it. But in the end, they chose to try. 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened a special session. The agenda was simple: to witness something that had never happened in 3,000 years. The Vecthari Dominion had requested peace negotiations with Earth. Ambassador Thesson of the Andrathi Collective watched as the human and Vecthari delegations took their seats. The humans looked calm and professional. The Vecthari looked uncomfortable, uncertain, like predators forced to consider that there might be another way to live. Beside him, his young aide whispered, "How did you know?" "All those months ago when the Vecthari declared war, how did you know the humans would win?" Thesson smiled. "I did not know they would win. I knew they would not lose. There is a difference. I do not understand. Humans do not know how to surrender. They do not know how to give up. They will fight until they cannot fight anymore, and then they will find a way to keep fighting. Against such determination, victory is almost inevitable. But they showed mercy. They chose not to destroy the Dominion even when they could." "Yes," the San nodded slowly. "That is what makes them truly dangerous. Any species can destroy its enemies. Only the strongest can choose not to." The negotiations began. There would be setbacks, Thesson knew. Old hatred did not disappear overnight, but something had changed in the galaxy. A species that had been dismissed as primitive and weak had proven itself to be neither, and in doing so, they had demonstrated something profound. True strength was not the ability to destroy. True strength was the wisdom to choose when destruction served nothing. True strength was offering an enemy a hand instead of a blade. Even after everything they had done, the humans had shown the galaxy something new. Now it remained to be seen whether the galaxy was wise enough to learn from it. In the chamber, the human ambassador rose to speak. Her first words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had happened. "We are here not as conquerors, but as neighbors. Not as enemies, but as potential friends. The past cannot be changed, but the future is still unwritten. Let us write it together." And across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for millennia began to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the universe could be something more than an endless struggle for survival. Perhaps it could be a home. The story of humanity and the Vecthari Dominion was far from over. But for the first time in 3,000 years, it was a story with the possibility of a happy ending. And that, more than any military victory, was humanity's greatest triumph.